he comes again off the turnover, and he slams it home! Outstanding girls basketball matchup between the team on top to the floor.
Good afternoon and welcome to Unscripted with SkoodSports. I'm John Skoudris, getting set to bring you all the sports that fit in to one video. Today we continue with our trip around the NFC of the National Football League as we take a look at the NFC South and predict the final standings for this uber-competitive division. Last year, the NFC South sent 3 teams to the postseason: the Atlanta Falcons, the New Orleans Saints, and the Carolina Panthers, with both the Falcons and the Saints winning a postseason game. This year, I see those 3 teams again coming up on top of the division, but only 2 will advance to the NFL's second season. Without further ado, let's take a look at the team we predict to win the NFC South, the Atlanta Falcons. Of course, it was quite an interesting season a year ago for Atlanta, coming off the biggest collapse in Super Bowl history and a loss to the New England Patriots in Super Bowl 51. The Falcons came back out and got off to a bit of a slow start. They picked things back up in the second half of the season en route to a wild card berth before triumphing in a road wild card matchup at Jared Goff and the Los Angeles Rams. Their hopes for a second straight NFC title went kaput in the second round of the postseason with a loss in the divisional playoffs to the Philadelphia Eagles 15-10. This year, the Falcons are reloaded and ready to go, now having not made a whole lot of changes in the offseason. Their key losses on offense include slot receiver Taylor Gabriel and other receiver Andre Roberts. On defense, they lost Adrian Claiborne, Courtney Upshaw, Dontari Poe, Atiba Rubin, and Kamal Ishmael, an outside linebacker for Atlanta's defense led by Dan Quinn. The additions via free agency were sparse. Tight end Logan Paulson, guard Brandon Fusco, and defensive tackle Terrell McLean joined the squad. But their biggest addition was probably their first-round pick in the draft, wide receiver Calvin Ridley, who will combine along with Mohamed Sanu and Julio Jones to give Matt Ryan an abundance of weapons, along with tight end Austin Hooper and running backs Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman. Ryan and company come back off a 10-6 campaign a year ago, expecting another postseason berth, and I certainly see it happening. Let's take a look at their schedule and why I see the Falcons advancing to the postseason yet again. As you take a look, the Falcons' schedule, not very difficult early on after that Eagles battle, and I see them getting off to a heck of a start. Atlanta will win the opener, as I did predict when I made my NFC East predictions over the Eagles on the road. They'll then come back for home games in 5 of their next 6 weeks, including back-to-back NFC South matchups against the Panthers and Saints. After the Falcons move to 3-0 with those wins, I see them taking care of 2 AFC North opponents, the Bengals at home, and a tough battle at Heinz Field on the road against Pittsburgh. They'll come back for 2 easy battles against the Buccaneers and Giants to head into their Week 8 bye on top of the NFL at 7-0. The Falcons then will hit a major slide out of the bye week, losing back-to-back road affairs against the Redskins and the Browns, both games in which they'll be favored in and will be considered heavy upsets. They'll then come back home to lose to the Dallas Cowboys to fall to 7-3. The slide will be muted as they'll bounce back on the road against the Saints to complete a sweep on Thursday night on actually a Thanksgiving affair, the Thanksgiving night game in November against the Saints to sweep New Orleans and take control of the division. They'll then go 3-2 the rest of the way down the stretch, taking care of business against the Ravens, Cardinals, and Bucks, whilst losing to the Packers and Panthers on the road. That'll put Atlanta at 11-5, 5-1 in the division, and 7-1 at home. Good enough to get them the NFC South title. In second place in the NFC South, Unscripted with SkoodSports predicts Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints. The Saints, of course, won this division a year ago, and so I do see the division changing hands yet again, as the Saints, who came in at 11-5, were able to take the division via tiebreaker over the Panthers and 1 game over the Falcons, as both the Panthers and the Falcons were wildcard teams a year ago. In the offseason, the Saints had a little bit of a turnover on both offense and defense, especially the offensive line. They lost Zach Strief, Andrew Tiller, and Senio Kelemati out of the offensive line. And on defense, Nick Fairley, Gerald Hodges, Delvin Breaux, Kenny Vaccaro, and Raphael Bush are all gone. They replaced those players and supplemented them both via the draft and free agency. In free agency, they went out and acquired guard Jermon Bushrod, as well as defensive tackle Jay Bromley. Also coming in, inside linebacker Demario Davis, and secondary players Kurt Coleman and Patrick Robinson, who of course was the outstanding slot corner for the Philadelphia Eagles in 2017. In the draft, the Saints traded up to select UT San Antonio pass rusher Marcus Davenport. Davenport was considered a bit of a reach via the trade-up, but at the same time, he's got a lot of raw talent as a pass rusher, and we'll see what type of impact he makes in his first year for the Saints, though I don't think they'll need much with the offense that they do return. Of course, Alvin Kamara was one of the biggest names last year as a rookie running back for the Saints, putting together an outstanding season, especially once Adrian Peterson was sent packing in the first month of the year. His touches went up from around 6 per game to 13 per game, and I expect those to continue to rise as he moves forward in his second year, especially with Mark Ingram facing a 4-game suspension to begin the campaign. Without further ado, let's take a look why I see the New Orleans Saints winning this division. As you see on your screen, the Saints start out a couple of home games at the Superdome against the Buccaneers and Browns. Pretty easy matchups for a good Saints team. I see them winning those ones, going away to start 2-0. Saints then head out on the road for the first time, falling to the Falcons, and then a battle at New York as they lose to the Giants in an upset. They'll bounce back on Monday night to take care of Alex Smith and the Redskins to move into their Week 6 bye at 3-2. Coming out of the bye, a road battle at Baltimore. I see the Ravens defense holding the Saints under 30 points and with it coming away with a victory. A rematch of last year's miracle in Minneapolis as the Vikings lose to the Saints, this time at home, as the Saints come out and bounce back to improve to 4-3. That'll kick off a bit of a winning streak for the Saints as they'll go red hot the rest of the year to clinch a playoff berth. They'll beat the Rams at home, the Bengals on the road, the Eagles at home, a big win there, before falling to the Falcons on Thanksgiving. They'll then lose their second straight game, falling on Thursday night at the Dallas Cowboys. Back-to-back victories on the road in the NFC South will set their sights on the postseason with triumphs over the Bucs and Panthers in their final 2 games. Big-time playoff performances from Breeze, Kamara, and company get them to the postseason, I should say, as a wild card by beating the Steelers and Panthers to finish at 11-5. Because they were swept by the Falcons in this prediction, Atlanta wins the wild card, or wins the division at 11-5, and the Saints win the wild card also at 11-5. In third place in the NFC South, the Carolina Panthers. Last year, Carolina clinched a wild card berth at 11-5, losing out on a tiebreaker to the New Orleans Saints. Of course, it was just 3 years ago that this Panthers team was in the Super Bowl, in Super Bowl 50 against the Denver Broncos, a game that they ultimately lost and are never really fully recovered from. Cam Newton continues to have a solid career, though he has not replicated the MVP performance of his 2015 campaign. In the offseason, the team did a lot to try to get him back to those numbers offensively. Despite losing Jonathan Stewart, Brenton Burson, Charles Johnson, Russell Shepard, and Ed Dixon from their offensive stable, they did replace them adequately with first-round pick DJ Moore, who, when he's not getting in trouble with the law, as he did this week, is a very talented product as a rookie. Elsewhere, they went into free agency to dive deep and grab C.J. Anderson, a running back from the Denver Broncos, who, of course, scored a touchdown in that Super Bowl against the Panthers. They also added Torrey Smith from Philadelphia via trade and Jarius Wright as a free agent, formerly of the Minnesota Vikings. On defense, a lot of changes for the Carolina Panthers. Defensive end Charles Johnson and defensive tackle Star Lotulelei, mainstays on the defensive front for these Panthers over the last few years. They are gone, as are secondary players Daryl Worley, Zach Sanchez, Kirk Coleman, and Jarius Byrd. They replaced those players both via the draft, where they got Dante Jackson and Rashad Golden in the second and third round, as well as in free agency, where they picked up veteran nose tackle Dontari Poe and secondary players Ross Cockrell and Denoris Searcy. Without further ado, let's take a look at why I see the Carolina Panthers falling off and out of the playoffs in 2018, as we take a look at Carolina's 2018 schedule. As you see, the Panthers getting off to a solid start, actually, for a team that I see finishing below 500. Carolina winning 3 of their first 4 games all at home, beating the Cowboys, Bengals, and Giants with their Week 4 bye early on. They'll lose to the Falcons in Week 2, and then out of their bye week after beating the Giants, things will start to go awry for the rest of the season for Carolina, as they will fall to the Redskins and the Eagles on the road before an upset loss at home against Joe Flacco and the Baltimore Ravens. A bounce-back win against the lowly Buccaneers will only stem the tide for so long, as Carolina will then lose 3 of the next 4 games. All those losses being on the road, as they'll fall on Thursday night to the Pittsburgh Steelers, at Ford Field against the Detroit Lions, and after beating the Seahawks at home, lose to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for what I think will be one of Tampa Bay's, if not their, only victory in 2018. The rest of the way, the Panthers will go 500, beating both the Browns and the Falcons, splitting one on the road and one at home, whilst being swept by the New Orleans Saints. At home on Monday night in Week 15, and on the road in Week 17 to cement a 7-9 season. The Panthers will finish up at 7-9, as you see why. Their road woes, 1-7 on the road, 2-6 against winning teams. My problem with Carolina comes down to the fact that I just don't see their defense being as good as it was the last few years. A lot of changes up front. I don't think that it's as solid as it was. Their offensive line has a few question marks, and in the end, I don't think that they're talented enough in an uber division to come out with a 500 or above record. So Carolina at 7-9, finishing in third place in the NFC South. And finally, bringing up the rear of the NFC South for the second straight year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. When Tampa Bay selected Jameis Winston first overall back in 2015, they could have never envisioned, or probably never envisioned, things dropping so far so fast. Of course, Jameis had a lot of issues in college, reported rape allegations, as well as, of course, the crab leg incident that was reported so widely back when he was still the quarterback of Florida State. But nonetheless, Tampa Bay drafted him, viewing talent over his character. And in the end, that has come back to bite them in the rear end. Jameis Winston, of course, has been suspended for the first 3 games of the 2018 campaign due to an incident in an Uber ride dating back to early 2017. And without him, Ryan Fitzpatrick, for the second straight year, will get time as the starting quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But in the end, it doesn't really matter in my eyes who the quarterback is. This is a Tampa Bay team without a direction, without solid leadership, and without many wins in 2018. Dirk Koetter returns as the head coach for Tampa Bay. They brought him in, of course, after firing Lovie Smith unceremoniously a couple of years ago, and a lot of people scratched their heads when they did that. They rationalized it by saying that Koetter has done great work with Jameis Winston, and they wanted to keep him in-house in order to continue to develop their young quarterback. Well, Jameis had the worst year of his career last year. He continues to have issues both on and off the field. Just look at what happened in that Saints game at the Metrodome or at the Superdome last year, when Jameis got in the face of Marshawn Lattimore on the sideline and started a brawl, resulting in his best receiver, Mike Evans, being kicked out of the game. In the offseason, the Bucs lost a couple of veteran running backs, Doug Martin and Charles Sims, and lost defensive linemen Clinton McDonald, Chris Baker, and Robert Ayers. They replaced those defensive linemen with a lot of veterans who have experienced success. Bo Allen and Vinnie Curry come over from the Super Bowl champion Eagles, whilst Jason Pierre-Paul, who of course won a Super Bowl in 2011, comes over from the Giants. Their early draft picks also supplemented the defense, selecting nose tackle Vita Vea in the first round, as Vea is expected to slot in and try to implement a pass rush for Tampa Bay. They drafted running back Ronald Jones in the second round before attacking the secondary with M.J. Stewart and Carlton Davis. In the end, however, as I said, I just don't see it being enough for Tampa Bay to compete in 2018. In fact, in my eyes, Tampa Bay is the worst team in football. As you see on the schedule, I don't see Tampa Bay winning more than one game. Tampa Bay will win that one game in Week 13, as I just told you, against the Carolina Panthers. Other than that, they'll be winless in 2018, losing their first 3 games to 3 really tough playoff teams from a year ago. The Saints, the Eagles, and the Steelers. All 3 of those games will be without Jameis Winston. Have fun. The rest of the way in the first half of the season, they'll lose on the road to the Bears and the Falcons before falling at home to the Browns. Losses against the Bengals and the Panthers will send the Buccaneers to 0-8 and probably get Dirk Koetter fired in the middle of the year. Things won't bounce back for whoever the interim coach is, as losses to the Redskins, the Giants, and 49ers will finally make way for their first win, a nail-biter affair at home against the Carolina Panthers. They will conclude their 1-15 campaign by losing their final 4 games against the Saints, Ravens, Cowboys, and Falcons to finish with one of their worst records since they lost, 27 straight games to begin their franchise back in the 70s, the Tampa Bay Bucs, as they have reverted back to disco days in Tampa Bay as the Bucs finish at 1-15. That'll wrap things up from here on Unscripted with SkoodSports. Next time out, we'll take a look at the NFC West and wrap up our 2018 NFL predictions right here on Unscripted. Until then, good night and good luck. I'm John SkoodSports. We'll see you next time right here on SkoodSports.